Let's work on this read later feature. And let's start by adding the button. In the post detail template, I'll add a new div below that div with all the tags. And there in that div, I'll add my button which says read later, like this. Now if we save this and reload, we got a button like that. I also, of course, want to work on the styling now. And for that, let's add an ID here to this div which contains this button. I'll name it read later. And select that ID for styling. It's up to you where you want to style it. I'll add it here. So select read later, and I'll start by giving this some margin. Margin top and bottom, let's say 2 rem, and 0 left and right. With that, there is more spacing. Now the button itself, of course, also should look differently. So I'll target the button inside of read later and give that a background color of transparent actually, but a border of 1 pixel solid and white, and some padding, 0.5 rem top and bottom, 2 rem left and right maybe. And for the font, I want to inherit the base font, which we're using on the entire page, so that this button looks like this. Now the text color should also be white, and there should be some styling when we hover over it. I also want to set the cursor to pointer, but then add the styles for hovering over it or for it being active. And here, I think it makes sense to set the background color to white and change the text color to a purple color, which we're using in our header. So in this main navigation, this dark purple color. I'll use this as a text color on the button if we hover over it. So if we now save this and reload, that's how this button looks like and works. And that's a nice style, I would say. Now the goal is that when we click this button, we kind of submit a request to our Django server with information about the post to which it belongs. And we then store that post in a list of posts which we save for reading later. But important, that list, of course, is different for every user who reads this post. And I don't want to store it in the database through a separate model, because there I'll have no good way of identifying the user to whom it belongs. That's why we can use sessions here. Sessions are managed automatically by Django. They are automatically user specific, so every visitor has his or her own session. And therefore, if we store data in a session, it's automatically mapped to a specific visitor. So sessions are perfect here. And therefore, when we click the button, a request should be sent to a view which adds this article to such a session. Hence, back in post detail, I'll wrap this button here, this read later button, in a form so that a request is being sent. And when we have a form, we therefore also need the CSRF token, as you learned. And then the action here should point at some URL, which we have yet to add, but it should definitely be a post request. And then I want to include a hidden input here, which contains information about the post which we want to read later. So here I want to set a value which is not set by the user, but pre-configured by us, the developer. And I'll give this input a name attribute as well. And here we could either store the slug or the ID. Both can be used for identifying a post, but I think it's easiest to just use the ID. So I'll give this field a name of post ID, and in the field I store a value of post.id. Post is a variable which is available, and we can access the ID of that loaded post and pre-configure this as a value in this input. So now we need to add a view and a URL for this. Now let's work on the view and the URL. Let's maybe start with the URL. I'll add a brand new URL here in my app-specific URLs py file, and I'll just name it read-later, but of course it's up to you which path you want to use here. And we'll have to point at a view. Now that view is a view we have yet to add, and I'll add it at the bottom of my views py file. I'll add it as a class-based view, so as a class, but you don't have to do that. You can add it as a function, and I'll name it read-later view. Now the question is, which view do we inherit from? And in the end, what I want to do here is I want to handle an incoming post request, so I will inherit from the normal view and simply add my own post method, where we get self and request. And in here, I now want to manipulate the session of this user and add this post to a list of posts which are saved for reading them later. Now we'll work on that in a second. For the moment, I'll pass, and I'll go back to URLs py and connect this path to that view, so to the read later view as view. And I'll also give this path a name of read-later so that we can construct a URL to that path. In post detail, we can now go to the form action, use the URL tag, and point at this read later URL, which I just added and named a couple of seconds ago. Now that is all wired up, and now let's work on the view to successfully add this post to the read later list.